Hello everyone, my name is Joseph Williams and this is my CIS 695 Masters Project demo. So my advisor is Dr. Akingbahin and my project is a web application called Workout Log. Okay, so before we get started, here are some useful links. The first link is to a live deployed version of the application, and if you're interested, you can visit this link and test the application out for yourself. And then the second one is a link to the front-end repository. So this is where you can find more information about the code for the front end, and you can actually download and install the code if you want to. The instructions are in the README file. So this is the README file for it, and it contains the project setup instructions. And likewise, the backend repository is also on GitHub. And if you're interested, you can install the backend based on the instructions shown here. And then if you combine the backend and front-end projects, you can run a local version of this application if you want to on your machine. Okay, so next, this is the outline of what we'll be discussing in this presentation. So I'm going to start with the project requirements and then talk about how the requirements relate to the use case, and then discuss the software design for the project. After that, I'll move to verification, validation, and testing, and talk about how the tests were conducted. And then after that, I'll talk about software quality assurance and planning. And then after that section, I'll cover metrics and discuss how you can kind of judge the complexity of this project. Then after that, I'll get into some of the implementation code shown in those GitHub repositories. And then after that, I'll actually do some demonstrations of the functioning application, so you get to see how the backend and frontend work. And then next, I'll talk about some of the actual refactoring and potential additional refactoring that can be done for this project. And then after that, I'll talk about what was accomplished. And then the very last slide will just have some references. Okay, so as I mentioned, this project is a web application, and the first requirement is for it to be a full stack web application. So it needed to have both a backend and a front end. The backend is sort of a layer of abstraction over the database, and then the front end is just to simplify the user interface so that the app can be efficiently used by the end users. And so the main goal for this project was simply to make tracking workouts easier, and that's another reason why I wanted to create a simple, intuitive UI, and also the UI needed to work well on both mobile and desktop screens. So here's the high-level use case for the system, and as you can see, there are two main users, a normal user and an admin user. So the normal user can create an account, and then after they create an account, they can log in and log out. When they're logged in, they can manage their personal workouts, and the workouts have target exercises associated with them. And then after they create some personal workouts for themselves, they can use those workouts as templates for completed workouts. And similarly, the completed workouts have completed exercises associated with them. And then the admin user has access to everything that normal users have access to, and also in addition, they have elevated privileges that allow them to manage users, so they can create, update, and delete users, and similarly they can manage exercises and manage muscles. So they're sort of managing like the built-in exercises and muscles behind the scenes that the normal users access when they're creating their workout templates. And when I say manage, I'm just referring to the basic CRUD actions. So manage essentially means that for instance, in the case of workouts, users can create new workouts. They can update existing workouts if they need to make changes. They can retrieve workouts from the database, and then they can delete workouts. So yeah, just the basic CRUD functionality. So that's the high-level use case for this application. And then in terms of software design, so the main approach was to create a single-page application. So single-page applications, or SPAs, are kind of different from traditional web applications, because in a traditional web application, each client request is responded to by a server with HTML or JavaScript, CSS, and the difference between the traditional page lifecycle and an SPA lifecycle is the initial request. Typically, the initial request in a single page application contains most of the UI, and then that UI bundle is saved on the client side, and then subsequent requests are done in the background, and those are typically, instead of containing HTML, JavaScript, CSS, those subsequent requests after the initial request to build the basic skeleton of the UI, they just contain JSON data, and then that data can be efficiently applied to the UI stored on the client side, and this kind of creates a more native experience for the clients, and ultimately just a more streamlined, efficient application. And the added benefit is that because the backend is just returning JSON data, you can easily add additional clients. So for instance, instead of just having web clients, you could create mobile applications that also consume the JSON data. So it also gives you more opportunities and more flexibility to kind of expand the types of clients that are consuming the data from that backend RESTful API in this case. And then for the tech stack to implement this single page application architecture, for the backend, I'm using Node.js for my runtime environment. So this is a runtime environment that allows you to run JavaScript outside of a web browser. And then Express is the web development framework that I'm using with Node.js to create an application that can receive HTTP requests and respond to those requests. And then for the front end, I'm also using the Node.js runtime environment, and I'm using that in combination with the React UI library and the Bootstrap library to create a convenient, intuitive UI for the clients. And then for the persistence, I'm using both a SQLite and PostgreSQL databases. So SQLite is what I use for development and testing, and then for the production application when it's deployed, I'm using Postgres. And then testing for the backend, I'm using the Jest module that you can install on the Node.js runtime environment, and this allows you to easily create automated tests for all of the different routes on the backend. And then for version control, I'm using a combination of Git and GitHub. And then finally, for hosting, I'm using Heroku, and this is nice because it's a free service, and also it kind of piggybacks on Git, so it makes deployment easy. And then the reason I'm using Postgres is Heroku requires it for production, or it requires it when you deploy to Heroku. So that's why I'm using a combination of SQLite and Postgres. So this is the entity relationship diagram for this project, and I touched on some of the resources already, but the main resources you have are the users, and then the users can create multiple workouts and the workouts kind of serve as templates for the completed workouts. And um, so if the user designs, so the user can create, for instance, a specific workout that targets their leg muscles, and then the after that's created, they can um, they can then create completed workouts each time they complete one of the leg workouts, to track their progress. And the workouts they can have multiple target exercises related to them, and then likewise the completed workouts can have multiple completed exercises associated with them. And then finally, um, there are exercises and muscles built in to the back end, so the user can kind of scroll through a list of possible exercises and pick the ones that target the muscles they want to work out. So that's kind of a quick overview of how this entity relationship diagram is set up. Okay, for verification, validation, and testing, for the front end, the complexity is reasonable enough to allow for manual testing. So I didn't actually have to write automated tests for the front end. I was just able to open the UI on a mobile size screen, and also on a desktop browser, and then just run through the functionality and verify that everything was working properly. If I add to the complexity later of the front end, it will probably be necessary at some point to implement automated testing, just to make sure that I don't miss any edge cases. But for the current version, manual testing worked well enough. And then for the back end, I used a testing framework called Jest to automate the tests, and this made it this actually made the back-end development more efficient, because I didn't have to worry about introducing breaking changes. As long as the test passed, I knew that I could keep adding complexity and features to the back end without worrying about creating issues in future versions of the project. So I did write quite a few automated tests for the back end, and let's just take a look at an example of running the back end test. So this is the command to run the test for the back end, and we're currently in the backend directory. And there are quite a few tests and test cases, so it takes a couple of seconds. And after the tests run, there'll be a summary. So this is kind of a summary of the test that ran, and you can see there were 182 total tests, and everything passed. So I can confidently deploy the application, because I know that I tested thoroughly, and there weren't any issues. So I addressed software quality assurance planning by focusing on trying to reduce the loss society as much as possible. So I'm not going to go through all of the details of this. You can take a look at the final report itself for more details, but essentially I just focused on trying to make the UI as intuitive as possible, and trying to minimize the learning curve for end users. And then through rigorous testing, I tried to avoid creating software that would crash frequently and need to be updated frequently. So that was my approach to software quality assurance planning. So here are the project metrics. The person months came out to be about 0.6875, and the total lines of code when you combine the front and back end portions of this project was over 7,000. So I think the main takeaway you can get from these metrics is that this was a significant project for a single developer to complete in one semester. And then, yeah, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but the implementation code can be found on GitHub for both the front end and back end. And I'm not going to spend time digging through the code now, but if you're interested, you can take a look at the code details and get a detailed view of the structure and some of the design decisions that were made for this project. And then, yeah, so finally, for this part, we're going to take a look at a few demos. So first, for the backend, the backend can kind of be thought of as a standalone application, and so if you don't need a front end, you can just call the backend directly. So for example, if you want to get the workouts for a particular user, and so each user is identified by a unique token, and then you can send a GET request to the workouts endpoint to get a list of the workouts saved for that user. So for this particular user, there are so there's one workout, and then the workout has a number of target exercises, and then here's a second workout with a number of target exercises. And so this is how the backend is set up. There are other endpoints you can take a look at, so I'll take a look at one more. These are the completed workouts, and yeah, similarly, you have different completed workouts and the corresponding exercises that were completed for each of those workouts. And so that's kind of so that's how the backend functionality works. And like I said, theoretically you could use the backend without a user interface. It's just a lot less convenient. And so now let's take a look at the desktop version of the application. Let's take a look at a couple test cases. Okay, so first let's register a new account. Let's create a user. We'll name the user Fred, and we'll give him an email address. And as you can see, the forms have validation to ensure that the proper format is used when submitting post requests. And so this is the user profile. No completed workouts yet, but we can add some. So first, what you would typically do is go to the Exercise Finder tab, and here you have a list of all the exercises that are supported by this application. And if you want more information about which exercises target which muscles, then you can select a muscle and narrow down that list of exercises. So if you're interested in quadricep exercises, then you select the quads on the map, and then you have a list of exercises you can choose from. And so there are pretty wide range of possible muscle groups and exercises, and this is sort of a guide that users can use to figure out how to set up their workout. So for instance, let's say a user wants to target their calf muscle, so they might want to do seated calf raises, and then what they would do is go to workouts and create a new workout. And so you would name this, we can name it legs. And then once you have a new workout created, you would go in and you would add an exercise. So let's find the seated calf raises. And then we'll say body weight. And then we'll go with 3 sets of 8 reps. And then since we're using body weight, we won't add any load, and then we'll set unilateral to true. So now you can see a new workout's been created, and if you select a workout, it highlights the muscles that are targeted, and you can see that the target exercise for this workout, there's just one so far. It's a seated calf raise, and you're supposed to do 3 sets of 8 at no weight added, so just a bodyweight exercise. So now you can go to the workout log tab, and you can add a new completed workout. So essentially what you would do is you go to the gym and you would do your workout, and then you would then you would add a completed workout that represents the work you just finished. So let's, for example, put in today's date, and let's select the workout. So because we created this legs workout, we can select it from our drop down. If we had more workouts, then we'd have more options. So let's select that workout, and once we submit, we can see that this workout was generated. And the reason why this is colored red is to indicate to the user that they need to update this data. So now what they would do is go in and update, and then you would say, okay, I did my 4 sets of 8 reps, and then you would submit it. And now if you go back and check, now it's green because this exercise is completed. And so if you go back to the profile now, you can see just one data point. This is the exercise that was completed so far. And yeah, and so the profile tracks the 10 most recent workouts. So in this example, we only have one, but let's log out and take a look at an example account with more data. So let's take a look at this one. So this one is tracking 30 completed workouts, but the graph itself is only showing the last 10. And so if we take a look at the workout logs, then we can see that they have more complicated workouts. So this one, for instance, this pull workout has 7 exercises, and it targets mostly the exercises on the back of your body, and then if you take a look at, we'll go to the workouts tab, and if you take a look at the push workout, then it targets the front of your body. So this is sort of a way you could logically set up your workouts to break up the different muscles you want to target for different days. And so that's an example of the core functionality that a normal user would experience when they were interacting with the website. So now let's convert this to a mobile size screen so we can see what this would look like on an iPhone, for example. So this is simulating how the user interface would look like on an iPhone X, and let's go ahead and log out, and then let's quickly take a look at an admin profile just to see some additional admin functionality. Now let's put the password in, and now, okay, so now you can see the admin profile. They haven't done any exercises yet, but they do have access to more information. So, or they have access to higher privileges. So they do have more access to user information. So they can see a list of users, and if you want to, you can delete users. So for instance, if you want to go back and delete this user Fred, you can, because you're an admin. And so you can also create a new user if you want to. And then also they have access to the list of muscles stored in the application, and also they can update the list of muscles, and they can update the exercises. And you wouldn't want normal users manipulating this information, so that's why it's allocated only to admin users. And so this is what the functionality looks like on a mobile screen. And this is important because typically, if you're working out in a gym, or even if you're working out from home, you would probably want to use your phone instead of your laptop to update and track and keep track of your workouts while you're actually in the middle of your workout. So it's important that this user interface work well for mobile, and I was able to accomplish that with this project. So that's the demo. Okay. Now, okay, so in terms of possible or actual refactoring, for actual refactoring, focus on maintainability. So I try to keep my code as clean as possible, and and so if I end up collaborating with someone in the future, or even if I just decide to come back and work on this project a few months from now, it won't be difficult for me to understand the code I wrote. And um, so yeah, I just focus on maintainability and try to make it as readable, um, and um, I try to avoid unnecessary complexity whenever I could. And then um, the nice thing about version control and testing is it makes it easier to refactor, because the test will show you if you've made some kind of breaking changes, and then version control makes it easy to kind of roll back your changes and go back to a working version of your application. And in terms of what was accomplished, I'm satisfied with the end results. I have a fully functional workout logging system, and it meets the requirements I specified in the requirements portion of my final report, and so it also those require it also the requirements it meets also includes working well on both mobile and desktop. And the nice thing about using the single page application architecture, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is that you can easily extend it to include a native mobile version of this application, because the native application can just be used as a separate client that also calls that backend RESTful API, and just builds just updates its display based on that JSON data that's returned by the backend. So finally, here are the references for the project. And that's it. Thank you.